Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Big East Rewind. I am your 7-foot host, Chuck Everson, and my co-host, my partner, as always, my point guard, Dr. Sonny Sparrow. How are you, Doc? What's going on?
Chuck, I'm great. I'm excited about tonight. I've been looking forward to this for 3 weeks.
Another Hall of Famer.
Another Hall of Famer, baby.
I mean, that was like 25, something like that. It's been
We
great.
Lost count. We just lost count.
Yeah. Well, listen, this guy is from the Massachusetts area, so there's a little bit of a thing there with New Yorkers and people from the Massachusetts area. You know, we got a little bit of that going on. So
hold on a second. I hope you noticed he didn't wear his Yankee gear, Bob.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Very respectful.
Chuck, Sonny, I'll say this to you. You know, we've had now 5. This person will be our 5th Kurt Gowdy Award winner for the Hall of Fame. Can you name the other 4 guys that we've had?
Oh man, I'm going to say Wilbon.
Yep, Michael Wilbon.
McDonough.
Yep. Nope.
Not McDonough.
Nope. One was
Wilbon. Rich Cimini.
No, you're way off, Bob. You're way off.
All right.
I'll give him to you because it's only an hour show, Sonny. I'll give him to you so you have an idea. It's Bill Raftery, okay, Jay Billis, Mike Wilbon, and Dick Hoops Weiss, our boy.
Oh, Hoops, our guy.
Weiss, yeah. Our guy. So without any further ado, Sonny, our guest today is a Boston College graduate, another Boston College Eagle joining us.
Another Eagle in the house.
4-time Sports Writer of the Year award winner, Associated Press National Sports Writer of the Year, the Dick Shapp and Kurt Gowdy Award winner, as I said, also an ESPN Lifetime Achievement Award winner, Basketball Hall of Famer, world-renowned sports legendary writer for the Boston Globe, Bob Ryan, to the show. Welcome, Bob. Thanks for coming in.
You're welcome, and I must set the record straight before we go any farther.
Okay.
I am born and raised in Trenton, New Jersey. I first went to the Palestra when I was 6 years old in 1952. I was present on January 8th, 1954, on a Friday night when Bob Schaefer broke Larry Hennessy's Palestra scoring record of 45 with 46 points against Baldwin Wallace. The last 2 coming on 2 free throws as he drove to the hoop and was tripped. I predate, therefore, the Big Five before it was organized, okay? My Philadelphia bona fides, Connie Mack Stadium, 21st and Lehigh, the Palestra, 33rd and Walnut or Chestnut, I forget which one.
Walnut,
and my first NFL game I ever saw was at Franklin Field. So I am a Delaware Valley guy. Tasty cakes, okay? Tasty cakes. I'm
man, you gotta have Drake's Devil Dogs, man.
Nice.
So I mean, I just want you to know that I just happened to have gone to school at Boston, and as things have transpired, I remained there since I ever got up here. It wasn't a plan, but that's the way it worked out. But my roots are sheer Delaware Valley.
All right. Well, stick with the Big Five for a second with me. How awesome is that place on a Saturday afternoon, doubleheaders at the Palestra, Bob?
Well, it's one of the great experiences of sports that I ever had, and the real heyday before John Chaney and Raleigh messed it up, you know. But it was those days. It was really phenomenal. I remember, the great thing is a doubleheader when there's a Big Five team playing an outsider in the first game and a Big Five game in the second game. I remember one night Weeville at BC we're beating St. Joe, by the way, in 1967, and the second game was Temple LaSalle. And as we had the game in hand with about 8 minutes to go, they started cheering back and forth across the Palestra, the Temple and the St. LaSalle fans, and it was electric. But I've been there for many a great moment, including the night that Jim Boyle shot a jump shot to beat 7th-ranked Bowling Green in the Quaker City Festival with Nate Thurman and Howard Comives on the other side. 7th-ranked Bowling Green. So anyway, I have often said that I would like to be buried at midcourt in the Palestra.
Well, it doesn't get.
I'm sure I'd be in a long waiting line. I understand that.
I loved just walking in the place. You smell the popcorn. You had the rollout signs, the streamers that everybody threw after the first bucket. Yep. I mean, to me, it was great. The only thing that was tough was the locker rooms were the size of a closet. Bob, you remember that?
Oh, well, I never had this. I never saw the locker rooms because, it's not like
Well, when you're reporting, you never got.
No,
in there.
it's not like the pros where you got, you go in the locker room and at least, and my experience was mostly before I was, writing. And I mean, I went to Villanova St. Joe games 2 or 3 times in the early 60s when I was still in prep school. And so, I mean, no, but I probably only covered that on one other time. The last time I was in the Palestra was St. Joe's great year, 04. And they were playing Temple on a Saturday afternoon. I happened to be in New York doing the sports reporters. I took the train down to 30th Street Station, walked over to the game, and I wanted to see St. Joe in person that year, of course. And I saw them, and they did a predictably workmanlike job of dismantling Temple that day. And so sadly, that's the last time I was in the Palestra. But
Wow.
it is the greatest place I've ever seen. That I've ever seen basketball is the Palestra.
Bob, I got to ask you, you were 6 years old. You said you were at the Palestra. Did you know like early on, hey, this is my passion? I want to
My
write.
father was the Villanova's assistant AD at the time for 2 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Bill Ryan. He's the guy that created the Grocery Bowl for promotion, where they filled Municipal Stadium and football with the likes of Ole Miss and Kentucky. And he was Bud Dudley's assistant, but he was the mastermind behind the promotions. I got the DNA. I always say I do not remember a time when we weren't at a game, going to a game, or getting ready to go to a game. I grew up that way. I grew up weaned on minor league baseball originally in Trenton, and then the Palestra and Connie Mack Stadium and the Polo Grounds, which we had friends. He had good contacts with Giants and the Phillies. When with the Phillies at the time, Mage McDonald was the Villanova freshman coach, and he was also the Phillies batting practice pitcher. And we had easy access to Connie Mack Stadium at the time. The answer to your question is, I knew pretty much early on that I, had a writing aptitude. I was a reader as well, and as well as a normal kid, lived a normal childhood, played everything, played basketball, and finally did play in prep school. And but I kind of wanted. I was channeled into this direction. Yes, as much as anybody you'll ever meet was destined to do something in life. At age 6, I was.
Well, you're growing up around it. I mean, you're just covered with.
But it might not take like my son. My son didn't register big time with him, but my daughter is a huge sports fan. You can't program these things, but for me it took.
Yeah, that's cool.
So-
That's a great place.
Why Boston College? How did you get to Boston College?
Well, very simple. I wanted to go. would have been very happy to go to Villanova. They were my first love. But my mother was.
Wait, hold on, Bob. Don't just say this for Chuck. Don't just
I love
make
that.
Chuck feel good.
No, I'm serious. I was a
He gets
rabid.
enough of this.
I was a rabid Villanova fan, and right into the 60s. I remember that 61 team, and I can name guys all over the place. And but my mother my father died when I was 11, and my mother thought at the time when time came, she thought it'd be better for me to get farther away from home than Philadelphia. So
Wow.
I was rejected at Yale and Williams and accepted at BC Holy Cross and Georgetown. And in the end, I picked Boston over Washington and Worcester. That's basically what it came down to.
Oh, at 11, that had to be tough. I mean, if you spent that much time with your dad, at 6 and 5 years later.
Yeah, but that's the way it transpired. And it turned out to be a perfect place in the Boston being Boston, sports oriented. And the papers were very vibrant when I was in there, and it turned out to be a perfect vehicle for me. No regrets ever. It was the right thing for me to do. I would have been very happy in Philly, obviously. I mean, I'm very fond of Philly, but covering the Celtics turned out to be the passport for my entire career.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to ask you,
for
how
sure.
soon after joining Boston College did you get that little flavor of green? I mean, how long did that take?
Well, I the first thing I did was the first week the season opened, I went to the opening night of the Celtics in '64, my first game. Actually, I went to the Bruins game before I even went to a Celtic game because they opened earlier. But I wanted to go to the Garden anyway. But I was always a college guy first. So and I was a sports editor at a school paper in prep school at Lawrenceville School in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. I was the manager of the football team, and I started on the basketball team. Now I was the sports guy, the sports guy of the whole class. And I think if you take a poll of my classmates at the time, who turned out to be the most like we thought he was going to turn out in terms of what he was going to do, I think I would have won the prize. They knew I was programmed to do this thing. So I always I loved writing and reading, and I obviously love going to games.
What do you remember about your first Celtics game?
That Sam Jones had the big night that night, and they walked all over the Pistons. This was 1964 in the zenith, the height of the Russell era.
Yeah,
Russell at this point is 29 years old. He's at his power, in the peak of his powers.
Yeah,
He's at the peak of his powers. They just kicked ass that night, and my buddies, I fell in. My friends were, the basketball oriented friends I had were guys from Philadelphia, guys like from all those parochial schools in the Eastern Seaboard, Monsignor Bonner, Fairfield Prep, Georgetown Prep, Archbishop Malloy, Chaminade, on and on it goes, and we're all basketball fans. And what we did was we would circle the calendar when it came out, the double headers. You remember the double headers and the NBA double headers. And then that, and the other one would be when Wilt's coming to town, so no matter whether he's wearing a Warriors uniform or a 76er uniform. And so I went to, and for $2, for 25 cents on the MBTA and $2 in the second balcony, you could go to an NBA doubleheader.
As a big guy, when I played the post, I would have given anything to see Russell versus Chamberlain at the height of their fame. What was that like?
Here's one for you, Chuck. Here's one for you. I saw a record set one night that it could be broken, but it's unlikely to be broken, but it could be. And that is in the first game of a doubleheader in which the 76ers were playing the expansion Sonics, Supersonics.
Mm-hmm.
Wilt scored 52. That's no big deal. But he scored 52 while going 8 for 30 from the free throw line. So, yes, 24 field goals, 8 free throws, 52 points. And wow. And 22 field goals, excuse me. And 22 missed free throws, I think, is still the record. It's withstood all the onslaughts of the Shaq O'Neal's award. Nobody ever missed 22 free throws, especially not while scoring 52 points. So wow. That's what I remember. But
that was before he went underhand then, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know exactly, when he decided, or he was persuaded to do that. This is 4 years after, he scored the 100 points the night he went 28 for 32 in Hershey, which still remains the greatest mysterious phenomenon ever. How he went 28 for 32 that night, and he was shooting overhand that night, I think.
Yeah, I got to talk to Paul Arizin because when Jay got to Villanova, he brought everybody back in the fold, and I'm talking to Paul Arizin about that night. It was amazing how he was. I think Paul had like 16, and he was like the second highest scorer.
Yeah, Al Attles went 8 for 8 that night. You can. That was the other little interesting thing.
That's another big name from the past. Holy cow! That was
Al Attles. We Quake Zone. Al Attles, a wonderful guy. Everybody loved Al Attles. He's still with us. I shouldn't say loved.
Yeah.
And but he's Mr. Warrior. I mean, he obviously he's spent his entire NBA career, in both Philadelphia and Oakland and San Francisco as a Warrior. He's never played for anybody else or coached anybody else or worked for anybody else. So he's very definitely that guy. But I go then translate when Wilt went to the Lakers. In a '69 series, I went to a couple of games there, and including the night Game 4 when Sam Jones hit the jump shot to win the game. I can still see Wilt, just distraught after that. That's one of the many games they should have won, but they didn't.
Yeah. So you were a journalism major at BC, correct?
No, I was specifically advised not to major in journalism. I didn't go to a journalism school. I majored in history. I was when you go to a school like Lawrenceville, they have a career night. You're getting advised by people like editors from the Wall Street Journal and Newsweek, and they were the advisors that we had. And I was introduced to them as the reigning journalist on the school paper. And they said, go get a liberal arts education, go work for the school paper. If you can work for your hometown paper in the summer, do that. And whoever gets you professionally will, steer you in the direction they want you to be in. And you don't have to go to journalism school unless you want to become an editor or something. You can go get a graduate degree later on, if that's fine. So I was advised not to go to journalism school. And I don't understand what you do for 4 years as a journalism major. I can see a 1 semester, maybe 2 course, but after all, then you got to go do it. I don't know what they do for 4 years. I have no idea. I can't imagine. I mean, I've spoken and I've gone on all over the country speaking to schools as a lecturer, as a guest guy and all that. But I can't imagine what you do. So no, I majored in history, but I wrote for the school paper, and I was the play-by-play broadcaster for the student radio station for 4 years, my 4 years at BC.
Wow.
So you're there. What did the sports in BC look like? Like specifically their basketball. What did that look
Well,
like?
Cousy was the coach. It was when I got there with Bob Cousy, it was the second year. And,
Okay.
so the first year was a get acquainted year and, inherit the team that he had. I think they went 10-11, something like that. So my freshman year, they got it going. I had John Austin. Remember John Austin? Was a wonderful guard, 6'2" shooter out of Archbishop, out of Mackin in DC. And
Okay.
he was Cousy's first big recruit, very sought after guard. And he scored, he was a big mid-20s scorer, and he still holds the BC single game record of 49, which he set against Georgetown back in 1963. And so he's a junior when I'm a freshman. And we go 22-7.
Nice.
And we go to the NIT when that still mattered. That's when the old days was a 25 teams in the NCAA. There were 3 at-large bids in the East. There was no league in the East other than the Ivy, and the Yankee Conference. And UConn won it every year in those years. They got that easy automatic bid, and then it was the Ivies. But that's it. Everybody else was an independent. And so there was a lot of competition. And Providence was really riding high then. St. Joe's was riding high then. And Penn State had a couple of good teams. Anyway, we go to the NIT. In the first round game, we play St. John's. And the first game was very interesting. It was a doubleheader. We played the second game. It was Manhattan against Texas Western.
Oh,
Wow.
It's 1965. Well, they beat Manhattan. This is the team that a year later won one of the most famous
National championship
of all time. Yeah. So we lose to St. John's. Bob McIntyre and Sonny Dove killed us. So anyway, the next year we go 21-5, and guess who we lose to, Chuck, in the NIT? The Wildcats.
That's it.
Yeah, we lose to the Wildcats. Billy Melchiani was that. That
That's
was
right. Yep, Billy.
and he was the guy. The next year is my junior year, and now we're loaded. We got a couple of sophomores named Terry Driscoll and Billy Evans to augment what we've got, and we go 23-3, and we get the bid to finally get the bid. The second bid BC ever had. They had one in 58, and we draw UConn in the first round, and we had beaten them badly at home. And this game, Fred Schabel was the coach. He's going to hold the ball. He held the ball. The final score is in the 40s. We win the game. We go that put you right to the regional. It's only a 25-team tournament. Now we're down in College Park, and we are playing St. John's in the first game of a doubleheader. We beat St. John's 63-62 by making, and I'm not making this up, and you can look it up. We made our last 23 free throws in a row.
Wow.
Including our 6'8" center, Willie Walters, who wasn't a great free throw shooter. Second game is one of the best college games I have ever seen. It was Princeton and Carolina. And Carolina beats Princeton 74-70 in overtime. And then we play them, and they beat us 96-80. Bobby Lewis killed us, not Larry Miller. And that was Dean's first Final Four team that we lost to.
Good that you don't remember too many details.
And then the next year, we lucked out. Now, here's one for you. You will hear, St. Francis just dropped basketball, everything.
Yeah, they dropped
the whole
everything.
sports program.
Yeah.
It's really sad. It's really sad. Okay, because they go back to 1896 playing basketball, by the way. So you hear that, and they're one of the 4 teams that was playing basketball in 1939 and that has never been to the tournament. The other 3 beats William and Mary, the Citadel, and Army.
Yeah.
But there's an asterisk on Army. In 1968, I know that Army was invited to the tournament. Bob Knight turned it down with an ostensible reason. You ready for this BS? Academics, we have to miss class. No, he thought he could win the NIT. And it was a very plausible assumption. They were very good. Well, they don't win the NIT. And they turned it down, and we got the rebound bid after a disappointing 17-7 season. So now we go down to Rhode Island to play St. Bonaventure with sophomore Bob Lanier. We lose 102-93. And he's not the guy that killed us. A 6'2" tweener those kind of guys used to hurt us. Yeah. Bill Butler had 32. And a guy named John Hayes, who was a 6'5" forward, had the game of his life at 18. And that's the one that drove us nuts. He wasn't supposed to score more than 4. So that's my BC basketball experience while I was there. And the next year, they go to the finals at the NIT. Cousy announces his retirement in January of '69. They were 5-3 at the time. From that moment on, they win 19 games in a row, including one over Spencer Haywood in Detroit, and another one over Duquesne with the Nelson twins. You remember them? And we go to the finals of the NIT, beating Kansas, Louisville, and Army, yes, and lose to Temple. John Baum's outer body experience game, I call it, and in the finals, and Temple beat us, and that's my BC basketball at my time.
So
listen, if anybody's listening and not watching, this is right off the top of his head. There's not a teleprompter, there's no notes. This is straight off the top. We haven't even gotten into the depth yet. Oh,
Right.
my goodness.
Oh, you asked the question. I just wanted
This
to
is great. No,
listen,
I love
this
it.
is awesome.
This is a history
So-
lesson for me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So take us on how you went from BC to the Boston Globe. Okay.
In addition to writing for the school paper and doing the broadcasting, I was an auxiliary member of the sports information department. Now there was a paid intern. I wasn't the guy, but I was an aide, an unpaid intern, an unpaid helper. And so I had an association and contact with sports information. And that's where you get to meet outside people, the writers from the papers and people. And so at the end of the year, the Boston Globe, they have an intern program. They still have it. And they're in contact with Boston College. And they were going to offer as a candidate the guy who was the real aide, who happened to be my roommate. His name is Reed Oslin. But Reed turned it down because he wasn't going to go into journalism. He had other ambitions. And so they said, well, we got another guy. I was the other guy. So I get this interview with the Globe. Three editors interview me, and I come in armed with my clips, and I got it. I got one of the internships. And the first day of the job, I graduated June 3rd, '68. On the June 10th, I started the Globe intern, and I met a guy named Peter Gammons. Does that name ring a bell at all? And,
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
sure.
well, he was a Tar Heel. He was also, like myself, a preppy. His father was a teacher at Groton School in Groton, Mass. And he was a Tar Heel. And so he had a basketball interest, but he was really a baseball guy at heart. And I love baseball too. So we hit it off immediately. We've been friends ever since. That goes back to June 10th, 1968. So that's how I got at the Globe. And then at the end of the summer, I was also in the Army. I just enlisted in the Army Reserve. I got into a reserve unit in March before I graduated. It's the height of Vietnam, and I got myself into a reserve unit, and I was going to have to go on active duty at the end of October. So even though the internship ended at the beginning of September, I said, hey, can I stick around until I go on active duty? And they said, yeah. So I spent Saturdays and Sundays covering high school football for the months of September and October until I went to Fort Knox. So I come back out in February of '69, and I'm back at the Globe, and they said, well, we can't promise you a job in writing, but you will get the next opening on the staff, which came in October. And then one day I'm sitting around in October, and the sports editor comes down and says, you probably think we forgot all about you, but things have happened and you're going to be on the staff. And oh, by the way, you're covering the Celtics game opener Friday night. What? I hadn't seen them play. I hadn't met the new coach, Tom Heinsohn. I hadn't gone to a game. I had never covered an NBA game. I was 23 years old. And the guy who had been doing it is the reason I got on the staff, because he left to go to the news and created the opening that I got. And they had no heir apparent, apparently. And they said, well, the kid likes basketball, and that's how I got started covering the NBA. And the opening night, they played the Royals. Cousy had taken the job, and it was his first game. So at least I had somebody I could, lean on a little bit. It was Bob Cousy.
So now you're at BC, you go to the Globe. At what point do you intersect with Dave Gavitt? Because he was at Providence. So when you were at BC, he was
in
at
the
Providence?
70s, during the 70s, early 70s. I always had my eye on college basketball. My first basketball, my roots were college. I always say my foundation sports were baseball and college basketball.
Uh-huh.
So I had reasons to get associated with Providence, and of course, so I got to meet Dave. And of course, they were culminating in that 73 team that went to the Final Four and lost to Memphis when Marvin got hurt. first half was one of the great halves. Ernie D threw that famous behind the back
Ernie D.
pass from midcourt, and Marvin got hurt, Marvin Barnes, and they lost to Memphis. They were, and they had, by the way, that year played UCLA very tough in Pauley Pavilion, and basically got one of those Pauley Pavilion home jobs, which I've been witness to, by the way, in those days. And I've seen them. They terrible home court officiating in Pauley Pavilion in those days, and they were motivated, and they had the one guy that might have been able to play toe to toe with Walton, and that was at that year, and that was Marvin. And well, they don't get a chance. They lose to Memphis when Marvin went out, but anyway, I got friendly with Dave, and as a matter of fact, stayed friendly with Dave for many, many, many years. And when I was honored to get that Kurt Gowdy Award that you mentioned, I had Dave present me, and
Wow.
it was so I was very fond of Dave, and of course I'm very fond of his son Danny, who's the vice president of basketball for the NCAA right now in the tournament. And but yeah, I looked up to Dave a lot.
Did Dave, as Dave was, dreaming up and then ultimately fulfilling the beginning of the Big East?
Yeah.
Was he someone that he spoke to you about that stuff?
No, not really, because at that point I was still covering the Celtics then, and no, I was not on the ground floor. I had no inside information about that, but I wasn't surprised that he had the organizational mindset to do a thing like that, and if anybody was going to do it, certainly he was a leading candidate to do it. So no, but I didn't have any inside information on it, but I've been going to the tournament since the very first one, which was in Providence, and not every year, of course, but many times, including this year, as you know. And I went, and but I, Dave, I just think he was terrific, and of course, the great disappointment of his career was what happened in the '80 Olympics when they didn't go. He was the coach of that team. I did see that team play a couple times in their run-up, including beating the Russians in Madison Square Garden, a very famous game at the time,
Right. And then, of course, he got into the Olympic team, the Olympics, and then bringing the pros in, and then.
But he's
into the Celtics.
Yeah.
When did he go into the Celtics role?
Well, that was, let's see, when exactly? Well, the Bird era, the end of the Bird era, because somewhere near the late '70s. Well, 79, I think. Because I think that was his last year. I think I think he spent the whole decade at Providence. Then he formed the Big East in '79, and then after that, a couple years later. But Larry was still playing, because we always knew it was trouble when he would call up in those days, 80, 81, 82. He would call a press conference during the day. It was Larry's hurt again. And he was going to tell us, and that's exactly what it was. Larry couldn't stay healthy in those days, and his back was bad, and he could, which eventually did him in. Dave was very proud to be with the Celtics, and for sure. And he had to make a big decision about how they were going to maintain what they had with the big three as they were aging, but he kept them intact, and he didn't make any. The big move, of course, was getting. We first had Reggie Lewis, and Reggie was definitely a stepping stone player, but what happened to him, and of course later on there was the Len Bias thing, and that was a killer.
Yeah, they had
touch on that for a minute, Bob. Touch on the Len Bias stuff for a minute, because that was when I graduated in '86 when that all happened to Lenny. I got drafted in that same draft that Lenny was picked in, and he was very excited. And all of a sudden, it was like flash in the pan, gone. Talk about Len Bias, what he would have meant to that Celtic dynasty.
Well, okay, first of all, let me say this, that twice Coach K has told me personally that the two toughest opponents he ever faced were Michael Jordan and Len Bias.
Yeah.
And he wasn't saying he was better than Michael or equally as good, but he was formidable. I happened to have been, I still don't know what I was doing there that night, because I had other reasons I remember that I would be in Cameron. But that night I was there, they're playing Maryland, and Lenny drops 40 on them at Cameron. And that was some show, I'll tell you. So I had a feel for Lenny Bias in that regard. And you know how they got in position to draft them, they traded Gerald Henderson to the Sonics for their number one pick. And the Sonics didn't tank on purpose. They just stunk.
Yeah,
and
they
got up with the number 2 pick. And the first one was Brad Daugherty.
Brad Daugherty,
Yeah. And they got number 2. And we can't believe it. This is going to be the transition player that's going to help them maintain, and they're coming out of the 86 team, which I still think is the best pre-3-point shot mania team that ever was, and so this is too good to be true. I happen to be doing radio, a part of a radio team on the day of the draft, as well as writing for the Globe. And I was part of a group that was interviewing Lenny Bias. And I can still see him sitting there in his gray suit. He had a new Celtic hat on. His father and uncle or grandfather, whoever, were beaming, standing in the background. It was going to be fantastic. And the next morning, I'm going to leave my house to get in the driveway. I'm going to go to the office and my son, who was then 15, comes running out of the house. Dad, Len Bias is dead. And that's how I found out that Len Bias had died. He had heard on the radio. And then, we go from there.
Yeah. Yeah, that was rough. I mean, and I got the opportunity to play against them several times at Villanova. We held them to 8 points in the tournament that year in '85. But earlier that season at Cole Fieldhouse, he destroyed us. He had like 30 plus points and just made a bunch of Jordan-esque acrobatic type moves that were just incredible,
I think he would have been not the top of the mountain, not the Bird Magic Larry LeBron superstar, but the worthy level, the second level, perennial all-star, Hall of Fame bound, excellent, great player, would have been a building block that would have helped them make that transition. Absolutely, there's no question. And also, it really, really destroyed Red, because Red was friendly. He liked Lefty, and Red was extremely proprietary toward all things Washington.
Right.
And this was like a coup beyond belief for Red, to get this kid who was from Maryland, DC, and that was a Washington or a DC kid in a sense, and he had him, and he was just so thrilled. It really shattered Red when this happened.
Yeah, Red was part of that group with John Feinstein and Lefty. They used to sit around and have lunch and
that's correct.
tell stories.
Let me tell you one thing on the run up. This radio station WEEI that I was doing stuff with at the time, during the run up to the draft, they were interviewing coaches of prospective #1 picks. Like they interviewed Dana Kirk at Memphis, and I'm sure they got Dean, talk about Darty and all. And I was there the night that they interviewed Lefty. And here's what I still remember. I can hear it ringing in my ears to this day. Lefty saying, "Leonard's only vice is ice cream."
Oh,
and that stuck in my head it'll never leave.
Yeah, that's nuts. So you had the pleasure of being the beat writer there for the heyday years for the Celtics. It was a nice period of time there, especially when that Laker Celtic rivalry was at its peak for guys like Sonny and I, for guys our age. That was must see TV. Talk about that. Talk about that for a minute. The rivalry and the Celtic pride versus Showtime.
There was so many subplots, because first of all, the #1 was Magic and Larry, naturally.
Right.
But then there was Kareem, and they had a nickname. I'm trying to think of what it was. They had a nickname for Kareem, the Celtics. It was. I wouldn't say it was affectionate, but it wasn't. I think they called him the Lizard because of the sun, the goggle look.
Yeah, right. Bug eyes, right. Yeah.
And I don't think anybody else called him the Lizard.
No.
But there was Kareem, who was a formidable figure, and Riley, had really developed a strong antipathy toward all things Boston at that point. Riley, felt, and they were going around saying that they would come to Boston for the finals, and the hotel alarm would go off at 3 a.m. They claimed, and they would complain about the hot water in the showers and all that stuff, and it's all nonsense. Well, I don't know about the alarms. I can't refute that, but I'm sure the Celtics had nothing to do with it. The one thing about the conditions at the Garden that people have to understand, then and now, Celtics are tenants. They're tenants. They don't control the Garden.
Right.
The one thing that I thought Red might be able to control was the towels. Other than that, not the shower water, no. But anyway, but Riley believed in that, and at least he transmitted that to his team. Oh, there was a rivalry. It was a real, and when they had one year they had the stupidity, I think, to play exhibitions against each other. The Celtics went out to LA, and sure enough, there was a fight, and of course, but there was one play that was a turning point, I think, in Riley's entire career, and that was McHale's takedown of Grambuson in 1984. Because Riley, there was showtime, right? Everything was finesse, fast breaks, finesse. They weren't featuring physicality at all. And when McHale did that, it was, I thought Cedric Maxwell had the great reference. I wish I could quote him directly, but his basic reference was, until that point, they crossed the streets, freely, but after that, they looked both ways and before crossing, and they tiptoed across the street. Well, the fact is that they were better than the fact is. Even Bird, I think, would admit that the Lakers were probably a better team in '84 than the Celtics. Celtics beat them up. They won that on the offensive boards and in physicality. That's how they won '84. I believe that Riley maintained, I'll never get out thugged again, ever. And he didn't. First of all, he gave lots of playing time the next year to Mitch Kupchak, who was a physical player. And they did beat the Celtics in 6 legitimate games in '85. First team that ever won a championship on the Garden floor.
On the parquet. Yeah.
But the other one they had lost when they lost in the finals was in St. Louis in '58. Well, this is the first time they ever lost on the parquet. And Kareem had the famous quote. He said, "I feel like Johnny Padres." So, which for baseball fans, had resonance. And he is a huge baseball fan, was and is. And then of course in '86, they didn't make it back because they got beat by the Rockets. And and there was a lot of question about what their future was. And of course, we all know that '87, their big move that made them whole was at the All-Star break, picking up Michael Thompson.
Right.
And that was a key piece of the puzzle. I always say, Chuck and Sonny, that the greatest series that never was the '86 Celtics against the '87 Lakers.
Yeah.
The Lakers were really good after they picked up Thompson, and the Celtics were phenomenal in '86. In '87, the Celtics were beset with injury. Their bench, Walton got hurt right away. He played 10 games all year, and you realize the year before he was crucial.
Yep.
They had injuries. Their bench consisted of Fred Roberts and Darren Day. And as opposed to the year before, it was Walton and Scott Wedman and Jerry Seasting. And they weren't as good. And McHale broke his foot and he got his foot stepped on by Larry Nance Sr. in February of '87 when he was off the greatest start of his career, and he never was the same again.
That was a big blow. Yeah, I remember that.
So
Give us a couple of good Larry Bird stories. I know you did the book with him. I know you were close with him.
Yeah.
The last article was Larry. You did the book Drive with him. Give us a couple of good Larry Bird.
Well, this is classic Bird. I guess it's really good. That promotion that still exists today, where at a college game, usually you have to make a layup, a free throw shot, a 3-pointer. Yeah. Okay, so they were doing that one night in Boston during the mid '80s, and I was at the game, BC, and I wound up being pulled out as the local quote unquote celebrity, right? So I go up there and I make the layup. I get to the free throw line. I'm rushing it before I plank a couple before I calm down and I don't make the three. Okay, so I'm telling Larry the next day at practice about this. So this is after practice. He's shooting around. I'm rebounding for him, and he says, "Okay, here we still not in the basket." He says, "Give me the ball, time me." So I give him the ball, layup, free throw swish, 3-pointer swish, midcourt swish, 17 seconds. You had to do it in 25 seconds. 17 seconds. Then he says, and if I were doing it for real, I'd try to bank the 3-pointer so I could get the long rebound.
Wow.
So that's one. Another one I love is we're in Chicago for a game early, and he's shooting. And I say to him, I'm busting him a little. I said, I got $5 says you can't make a left-hand 3-pointer. So he goes into the corner. Of course, smart guy, go to the corner, shorter shot. Second one, swish. So I hand him the 5. He takes the 5. He puts it inside his sock. And I want to believe to this day he played that whole game in Chicago Stadium with the $5 bill in his sock, because that's what he would do. And then one more is one day in practice during a playoff when Casey Jones was coaching. And I'm at practice and we're all there. And I was talking on the sideline before practice, and all that. And all of a sudden I hear this big cheer. And guys are all going like this. And what happened was Casey had said, if someone can make a half-court shot, there'll be no calling out practice. Well, guess who grabbed the ball first and made a 3-point shot, a half-court shot? I don't have to tell you. So,
right.
It's parts of him were fictional, really.
I have to ask you about Bill Walton because I listened to him do games and he seems like sometimes he's on planet Saturn, sometimes he's not. What was it like when he came in? There was no question about the basketball effect, but how about the off the court?
Yeah. First of all,
stuff?
the only player that ever came in here that lived in Cambridge, and he just whether he felt there was some aura of intellectuality that was going to seep into him from down the street from Cambridge, from Harvard, but he lived in Cambridge, and he cultivated friendships outside of basketball. He was the happiest as happy as he's ever been, including the year at Portland won. He'll tell you he identifies as a Celtic, not just, I don't say doesn't identify at all as a Trailblazer, and certainly doesn't identify as a Clipper. I can tell you that. Yeah. But he identifies as a Celtic. That was a year that was pure bliss for him. And I mean, we've gotten very friendly over the years, and he's just a interesting guy. I can tell you that right now. I kid about listening to him do a broadcast. I kid him and say, I was like it, Bill, when you finally get around to basketball. I mean, you know what he's like. There's only one. And but he was so important to that team. He couldn't believe how happy, playing with Bird. And I'll tell you right now, he and Bird together was you'll never see anything like it again, unless Jokic finds somebody like Larry to team up with. That's only a possibility. You're not going to ever see anything like that again. They ran a give and go right out of the New York Celtics 1922 playbook that was unstoppable because they could alter the timing of it. And Walton could deliver over his shoulder, around his back, between his legs, and they would stagger it. And it was, as soon as Larry came in, and of course, remember, Walton would come in and probably playing against second string center. And they would just, that year was just ridiculously fun to watch. But those two together were just sublime. And it was, and you remember that year that we were, Walton, that's the most games he ever played 80 games that year. And the 2 games he missed had nothing to do with his famously bad, feet and ankles. One broke his nose for like the umpteenth time. He's broken his nose, upwards of 10 times. And the second time was he was sick. And other than that, he played all 80 games and every exhibition, which he had, everybody else in his other teams could not believe it, And I'll say this, my one reason why I claim that the 85-86 Celtics are the greatest team of all time, once again, prior to the 3-point, shot mania, the era where the Warriors had that one, run, which certainly is worthy, that no team ever brought a Bill Walton type off the bench of that level. 6 men of the year are usually multi-position players, usually 4-5s or 3-4s. And
Bobby Jones.
Oh yeah, Havlicek was the ultimate, but in his day. But McHale was a 4-5, and Morrissey a 4, but he could. But I mean, that's who they are, or a specialist, a great shooter like Lou Williams, that kind of thing. But nobody ever brought a center off the bench who became the 6th man of the year, and he automatically. And I'm going to tell you something about his rebounding. I didn't realize this till he came. His technique, his rebounding technique, his timing on a defensive rebound was so good that he could time the instant the ball was ready, just about ready to come off the rim. And I call it like sweeping crumbs off the table into his hand at the exact moment that it could have been borderline goaltend, but you couldn't, you couldn't be sure. And I've never seen a technique like that. And then of course, half the time he's already turning to throw the outlet before he hit the floor.
Yeah.
And there's nobody like that. I mean, Jokic is the next closest thing as an all-around passer. I'll give you that. I'll give you that. And I admire Jokic, and he deserves to be in that conversation. But you throw in the outlet pass, and that puts Walton number 1.
Yeah, that's it was a lot of fun for us as young basketball fans to see that whole team and go through that whole thing. Is it normal course of business? I know you're close with Larry, still are, right? Is it normal, business for a sports writer and a superstar player to become close like that? Or do you think he trusted you because you respected his opinions, and when you did your writing, you kept it, between the lines, right?
All I can tell you is that unlike a lot of people, I have a different viewpoint. To me, when you're covering a team, you're a salesperson. And the commodity that you're selling is you. And you're selling yourself to the players, to the coaching staff, and the administrators, and by the way you carry yourself, the knowledge you possess, the questions you ask, the questions you don't ask, the stuff that you don't write, the stuff that the difference between what's printable and not printable, or what's printable, not printable today, but might be in another month. It takes a while to earn their trust. And Larry and I hit it off right away, frankly. And he actually told people, I'm just saying he said this, I'm not at the end of the first year that Bob could be a coach. Well, that's bullshit. No, although I did coach one summer league team, I'll admit that. But other than that, no. But my biggest calling card, guys, was enthusiasm. I love basketball and I love baseball too, and those two are fun passions, just joys, and other things are I like them, but they're more business. But not basketball and baseball. They've never been business to me, and I think people can sense that, And so I got along with him great from the beginning. One night, for example, in his rookie year, we were in Chicago, and after the game, and I go back to the hotel, and he's there with some friends, and they're having something to eat, and he tells me to come in, sit down, and at the course of the time, he goes, "Man, I never thought I'd be eating dinner with a writer." So yeah, well, that was a compliment, great for me. It was really nice. So, but I was in the previous group, the original, I called the Havlicek Cowens group, and I made good friends. Havlicek, I did his book, his only book. I did his book.
Yeah.
Cowens retired in my hotel room. That's one of my favorite stories in 1980.
He was some player. He was one of those guys that got floor burns, just as soon as he came on the court, he was diving into the stands. And
there was Dave was absolutely like that. And people ask you all the time, who's your favorite player or who's your most memorable player? Well, two different things. Favorite player, the best player is Bird. Okay. And that's no argument. Havlicek's like 1A or very number 2, I never thought I'd seen anybody I'd like as much as Havlicek, and then along came Bird, but the most memorable character that I covered is Cowens. The reason being, he was a Hall of Fame player with an electrifying style that you just alluded to, his floor burn style and his hustle style. And he's the most intellectually curious player that I ever dealt with. Now, I'm not saying he's a raging intellectual, but I'm saying that he asked me questions. He asked me questions about the job. We had conversations that had nothing to do with basketball, more than any player that I ever dealt with. And I'm still friendly with him. He lives up in Maine now, and I talked to Dave. Dave was a treasure, and we got, he obviously trusted me. And the whole story about how he retired in my hotel room in Terre Haute in training camp in 1980.
Tell that story. Give us that.
Well, let's roll. Let's do it.
So it's the training camp. It's the second year of Bird. It's Bird's second year, and they're playing exhibitions in Indiana. Gee, I wonder why. And we're in Terre Haute, and the night before they had been to Indianapolis, and that night they were going to Evansville, and to play the Bulls. So I go to the shoot around in the morning, and I'm on the phone at noon 12:30. I'm on the phone with Paul Silas, who's now playing for Seattle, and talking to him. We're friends. And there's a knock on the door, and I open the door, and there stands Dave Cowens in his practice uniform, still on, holding yellow legal pad papers. So I said, "What's up? Come in." I said, "Hey, I'm talking to Silas. You want to talk to Silas?" So he did. And then, all right, so what's up? He hands me the thing. I read it. Oh my God, this is a retirement statement. I'm retiring. He wrote out why he was retiring right now, here and there, and on the spot. And I said, "What do you want from me?" He said, "Well, to put it in order, edit it if you need. And then can you get it in the paper?" We had an afternoon paper still, 1980. And I said, "Okay, give me about an hour," because I knew he could write. He had written something for the Globe before. He was very literate. And he goes to the door, and then he turns around and says, "Do you mind if I call Red first?" Gee, Dave, no, I don't think that's a bad idea. So, can you imagine? So he calls Red's secretary named Mary Faraday. He said, "Hey, Mary, it's Dave. Can I talk to Red?" And Red, it's Dave. Remember what we talked about the other night? Well, I'm doing it. Okay, I'll see you in Boston. So now the story, 4:00, the bus is leaving for Evansville. He gets on the bus, and it tells the team now what's going on, that he's leaving. And now the bus pulls away, and I'm standing there. So what's up now? He said, "Well, I'm going to go home, Newport, Kentucky." And little problem though, typical Dave. he really was short on cash at the moment and didn't have any credit cards with him. So I ran into Avis and handed him the keys. Now, how many writers have a story like that?
Nobody. That's unbelievable.
That's just gospel truth, every bit of it.
Now, you said Hondo was your other guy. I got
Yeah.
to meet him a couple of times. We used to go down and see Coach Mass down in Florida in his later years when he was coaching at Northwood. And in the front row would be Boston icons, Bobby Orr, John Havlicek, Chuck Daly, and Billy Cunningham would be sitting in the front row at all the games. So talk about Hondo for a second and what he meant to the team and your relationship with him.
John was as down to earth, general. I always said that John was as courteous and nice to a high school kid or a young guy with a tape recorder as he was to, a national syndicated columnist or, anybody. He was unfailingly polite. He was a Midwestern guy, pure upbringing to the core, and straightforward and honest, and it just, his whole background was and when I did the book and I went back to his house and saw where he grew up, and basically John grew up in Lansing, Ohio, which is on US 40, and he was the reason he was not allowed to have a bicycle when he was a kid because they thought it was too dangerous because they were on this major thoroughfare. But the school was like a block up or two from behind his house. The church was another block over. The playground was another block over. His whole world was bounded for like about 6 square blocks. And the biggest, growing up, the big thing was on Saturday afternoon, you scrape together a few coins and get on the bus and go over to Wheeling, West Virginia, across the border, go to the movies. And anyway, John, and I'll give you one anecdote to tell you the way they lived. When he was a senior and being recruited by Fred Taylor at Ohio State in a senior year at his high school, he was also a baseball player. He was a very good baseball player, and he was also a very good football player who was drafted by St. Louis, by the Cleveland Browns. We can get to that. And Coach Taylor called up and said, I'm just coming down to take the family out to dinner. So he shows up at the house. John was at baseball practice, and then he comes home and he sees the table set and the food's out, and turns out they misinterpreted what he said, because you don't go out to dinner in John's world. There's nowhere to go. There's no such thing. And Mom prepared this wonderful meal. But the point is, that's the way they lived. That they didn't go out to dinner. There was no such thing. And this is the roots. This is his roots. And intelligent player. Oh my God, he used to get so frustrated that some of his teammates, when if he saw a team run a play, against them, and he filed it away. And next time he saw them setting a call a number or coming, he knew what they were doing. And he couldn't understand why everybody else, was so slow to pick up on things like that. He didn't yell at them or anything, but it frustrated them. But and he was as intelligent a player. And of course, the legendary stamina. Look at the numbers of minutes played. Blow your mind. And in the 1969 finals, I think he played all but 2 minutes in the 7-game series.
Yeah.
So
I got to see him late in his career. I remember that triple overtime game.
Oh yeah, 76, of course.
That was unbelievable.
Well, he was 36 at that point, and he made that famous shot that they created the second that they thought had won, and it turns out the 2 seconds were left on the clock, and after they cleared the court, and Guy Hurd hit the game time basket. When Westfall went up to John McLeod and said, if we call timeout, we get a technical, but we'll get the ball at midcourt, and we'll be down by 2 instead of 1, and that's exactly what happened. JoJo White made the technical, and then Hurd threw the ball in at the buzzer, and they went to the third overtime. John, look here, pure and simple, guys. From 68 on, when Wes was starting, I'd say and Oscar was starting to slow down a little bit. Certainly from 69, 71, he was the best player in the league, the best all-around player in the league. He was better than West. He was better than Oscar, because he was younger and fresher, and his legs were, and they were on the downside a little. He was the best two-way player ever, and going forward, nobody was ever better than him. You damn him with faint praise, thinking about him as a great sixth man. That was a technicality. Even his second year, he was now second on the team in minutes played. Yeah. But he's coming off the bench because they were deep enough that Red could afford to do that. And once he became a full-time starter after Russell retired, he led the league in minutes played 2 years in a row at 45 minutes plus. So, that's.
No load management? No.
Yeah,
load?
right. Yeah, no load management. No, it was and just knowing him, was a complete pleasure, and he treated everybody with respect, and I was very fond of John.
Now-
I want to take you
ahead,
back to college for a second, because
Yeah.
I want to ask you, when the Big East is formed and now Boston College is part of it.
Yeah.
I know it makes sense, the geographics of everything, but as a Boston College grad and a person who was involved in the sports, how did you view it? And then looking at, okay, Dr. Tom Davis and then Gary Williams, did you think, okay, they're outmatched? Or do you think, oh no, they're on the right track? What are some of your thoughts
I mean,
about?
they won it twice.
Oh yeah, no, they were solid, but
They won it twice, and no, they fit. It worked. They
Right.
were able to recruit these guards. Look at the succession of guards: Bagley and Adams and Dana Barros. Really
oh
good.
yeah, I had to try to cover those guys. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking.
Yeah, I mean, they were able to hold their own, and Dr. Tom was an excellent coach. Look what he did at Iowa, and Gary, Gary Williams. I'll have to tell you, it was had been a recruit assistant under Chuck. Then he went on to AU, and then came back. And after Dr. Tom left, in his first year, they went 25-7 and went to regional in. Well, they didn't get to the regional. Damn it! In Ogden, they got beat. St. Joe's beat them. With throwing a million threes out there. Oh no, I'm sorry. They lost to Virginia. They lost to Virginia. They had Ralph and Virginia team down at halftime, and Ralph went in foul trouble, and instead of taking advantage of it, they went into a coma and got beat by Virginia. But they had good teams. No, they were flourishing. And then when Jimmy O'Brien was there, and the team in '94 went to the Final Eight, lost to Florida, one game away from the Final Four. '97 they won it again. They won the league. I mean, they were still, in those days, they were very, very viable. That once they went to the ACC, they entered with a very good team. The first year they entered the ACC with Chuck, with Jared Dudley and Chuck, and Smith, Craig Smith, etc. They went to the ACC tournament final and lost to Duke by 2. They beat Carolina. They were really good that year, and that's a team that got beat by St. Joe's, who threw like 14 threes before we were ready for the 3.
Did you keep relationships with them? How did your?
I had a staggered, because I was. All right, here's my chronology. Covered the Celtics in '69 to '76. Was off for 2 years, in which I did a lot of college basketball feature writing, and also covered the Red Sox full time in '77. I only did it 1 year because Peter Gammons had left to go to Sports Illustrated, creating the opening, and they decided to come back after a year. And you got to give him his job back because he's one of the best baseball writers ever lived. And now I'm floating for a couple of years, and in '78 they have the franchise swap with the Buffalo Braves and the Clippers and all that business. The Braves become the Clippers, and they swap, they trade the players, and
McAdoo,
and they picked up Billy Knight, Marvin Barnes, and Tiny Archibald. And I said, I want to cover this team, and I put my hand up, and they gave me the team back. And that year, that's when they drafted Bird at the end of that year. And I had seen Bird play at Indiana State, and I knew they had something good, but not quite as good as he turned out. But so now I'm covering a team for 4 more years till '82, and then '82 I got passed over for being a columnist. I was so upset. I was wounded. I was feeling sorry for myself, and I got an offer to go to television, local TV, Channel 5 in Boston, and I took it. But even though I went to work for Channel 5, I was still writing a column once a week for the Globe. They asked me to stick, and I did that. But TV wasn't for me. And after a year, I wanted to get out, and I did get out in April of '84. And the very first day I went back on the job, I went out to Detroit to cover the first round of the best 5-game series I've ever seen, which was the Knicks and the Pistons in '84, which was Bernard King versus Isaiah and a company. It was fun. And so I'm now back floating around. And then '86, Dan Shaughnessy was covering the team. Gammons leaves the Globe to go back to Sports Illustrated, and Shaughnessy wants to cover baseball, and they need a Celtic writer again. And after I interviewed a couple of people, I said, yeah, I'll take it back. And that was the '85-'86 team. And the last 3 months were the greatest fun I ever had covering basketball. It was the best decision I ever made. And I stayed there until the end of the 87-88 season, when my book with Larry Bird was coming out, and they took me off the beat because of the conflict of interest possibility, and that was the end. And in 89, I became a columnist, which I remained until 2012. So as a columnist, you're doing everything. I went to Final Fours every year. I covered colleges. When UMass had the run in 95, 96, I went to 15 UMass games that year. And they went to the Final Four. And I went to, I got picked. I started covering golf big time in '97 in the majors, and I went to 6 Ryder Cups and about 15 majors. And I always thought I'd be there when Tiger broke the record. And of course, what happened there. And so anyway, that's the chronology.
So you mentioned earlier about being a baseball fan, and I know you wrote a book on the Red Sox winning the World Series after all those years. As a Yankee fan, I have to ask you this. I can't let you go without asking.
Go ahead.
So talk to me about the rivalry that went on and what it was like in Boston when all the players' wives and everybody was dancing on the pitcher's mound in 2004 when they beat the Yankees.
Well, the history, the tortured history, that it was 86 years at that point, and they had
The curse.
7th games in 46, 67, 75, and 86. 86 was the closest any team ever came to winning a World Series and then not winning a World Series. Literally one strike away in Game 6 before the roof fell in. And so, all this. I said at the time, guys, before they got it done in 04, it's the most narcissistic group of fans in America. They think that nothing bad ever happened to anybody else. They should go talk to Cubs fans or go talk to Cleveland fans who still haven't won since 48. And then they did finally come around and win. But the Yankees, the Yankees were cause of some of their angst. Obviously, that they had never beaten the Yankees in the playoffs or anything. And then 03 was, the painful Aaron Boone home run off of Tim Wakefield in Game 7. I covered all those games, and it was all this doom and gloom and woe is us. And now they're down 0-3 to the Yankees. Game 3, they're down. They lose 19-8, and I write a column because all the dialogue before the playoffs was they want the Yankees. Fans want the Yankees. So, well, you got the Yankees. You happy now? After Game 3, right? What are you going to say? And of course, you all know what happened. They come back. We're the only team ever come back from 04 and win the thing. And it was everything. It wasn't just that they got it done after 86, beating the Yankees along the way. Now, there were people, guys, when they beat the Yankees, there were people who were saying, well, this is enough. Believe me,
Really?
This is enough. We don't have to vindicate ourselves by winning the World Series. Well, that was bullshit. You had to win the World Series. And they did. And it started to run up to 4, up to 18. And this has been their century. In Boston, we still have more parades than any municipality. And we're the only municipality in America that has won in all 4 sports in the 21st century.
Yeah.
And we did it in a 7-year period. So, but the Yankee rivalry, here's the thing I've observed. First of all, I don't have the DNA. I told you I grew up in Trenton. I didn't grow up as a Yankee fan. I was a New York Giants fan. And then when they moved to San Francisco, I stayed with them. And secondarily, a Phillies fan. I was very grieved at 64. I can go chapter and verse on 64 for you, believe me. I always say that's the year the Phillies won the pennant, but the season was too long. But the Yankee rivalry, the Red Sox make more out of it than the Yankee fans do.
Yeah.
They just do, and they do make more out of it. And the Yankee fans kind of laugh at them a little bit, I think. But now the table had turned, and now since in this century the Red Sox have won 4 and the Yankees have won 1, and that remains the case until the Yankees get it done.
Varitek was a big guy that helped get everybody moving. He kept saying, "Don't let us get this next one. Don't let us get this next one."
That was Millar.
Oh, Millar, yeah.
Yeah, Millar was the resident engine.
That was unbelievable. And they beat up, and they got to Mo, which nobody got to Mo at that time, and they got to Mariano.
Well, they got to him because he did something. He walked Millar to lead off the night. And of course they pinch ran Dave Roberts, and that's why they picked him up on trading deadline. The same day they traded Nomar, which was a big story, they also picked up Dave Roberts, which was no story to people. And he had studied Rivera, and he knew that his big calling card was holding the ball. And after he threw over twice, he said, "I know now I can go." And he did. And of course, the thing was that Joe West at second base, it was a close it was a great throw by Posada. Great throw. He wasn't a great thrower, but he remember had that sidearm delivery. But that throw was right there. And Jeter was famous for that famous swipe tag. And I could see an umpire getting, blowing the call, but he didn't. He got it right. You see the replay. He was safe.
He was safe. Yeah.
And then Miller hits a ball up the middle. I talked to Rivera about it the next year later, and he tried to kick it. He almost kicked it, and the ball went right under his foot in the center field, and that scored the tying run. Then they finally won it in the season in the 12th inning home run.
That was something. I'll say that. Even as a Yankee fan, you almost felt good for the Red Sox fans when you saw them celebrating. And I was, George left the lights on. I mean, they were going to turn the light. They wanted to turn the lights off, some of the people in the front office, but George left the lights on and let them celebrate and stuff like that, which I thought was really cool. Yeah. So we're a little bit up against it. I could do this all night, Bob, because you're a fascinating guy to listen to on this and the stories and stuff. Or we have to have you come back and talk about some of the other things that you've done, because there's so many things to talk to you about.
We're just scratching the surface.
Oh my God, this is great. So let's just move one question into modern day, and then we'll call it a night. Okay. Yep. So talk to us about your thoughts on college basketball today with the portal and the NIL and all that kind of stuff.
Well, we're in a shakedown cruise. Obviously, this is only the first full year of everything. With the transfer portal had 1,800 people last year. I don't know what it's going to have this year. That's a number I heard. And we've seen how it has affected so many teams, men and women, and that's the way it's going to be. And the NIL, it's the way it's going to be. But now, of course, the NIL, there's a legality situation where the government's going to have to get involved. The government gets a uniform procedure, because now state by state, there's different regulations and stuff and opportunities that aren't fair if for everybody. And I think that's one of the things that Charlie Baker says he's going to do as the new, our ex-governor, who's now the new NCAA head, is utilize his political contacts to try to see if they can make some headway and get some uniformity on the NIL. So we're learning about that. I don't know how it's going to shake out. It's just different. It's not going to be the way it always was, but it hasn't been for a long time with the 4-year. Once we had one and done, once we had once we had not so much Spencer Haywood, but the second wave that Kevin Garnett started, back in '95 of the young guys. Okay, so it's a shakedown cruise. About the tournament, though, let's get right to it. It was predictably unpredictable. If ever was going to be a year of madness and chaos, it's a year in which you had multiple teams being number one during the course of the year. A year in which you had back-to-back weekends where 1 and 2 ranked teams lost on the same Saturday night. A tournament in which of your 4 number ones, the fewest losses was 5. I guarantee that's a first. And that's the year that's where we are. And so it's not shocking that we had the emergence of a Florida Atlantic and a team that San Diego State, and a Miami, going farther than they ever have before. And then one elite blue, let's say UConn's a blue blood. They have been since 5 years. So you're a blue blood. And I want to say this about them. Have you ever seen a team, Chuck, that in your experience and Sonny, that has ever brought a really useful 7'2" guy off the bench?
Other than Villanova when I played? No.
Never been a team like this. And when I said that the first time, the name that popped into my head, though, was Sven Nader. But he wasn't 7. He was only 6'11". Thank God. But this kid can play. Klingman.
I tell you what, they're clicking on all cylinders, Bob, aren't they?
Oh, they're touching all the bases right now, and Danny can coach, and they're the logical favorite. But given the way this year has been, San Diego State could turn them into some 55-54 game. You know that, and so if they do play them, and I'm not dismissing anybody in this one, but I'm pulling for UConn as out there back in the Big East, and
right.
So and that's our regional buddy, and I'll root for them.
it would be great for the conference too, because I don't think the conference has gotten a lot of respect this year. You know.
No, and they had a lot. I went, I thought there were a lot of good teams. Look at their record. We all know they lost those 6 out of 8, right? There's no bad losses because there were no bad teams. Hardly. Really, truly, no horrible losses there. Teams they lost to were respectable. Every day, one of them, including Pitt. Everybody. They didn't lose to NCs. They didn't lose to anybody bad in those tournaments. They lost to good teams, and now they're playing well again.
Well, it's going to be a good weekend of basketball. That's for sure. It's going to be 2 exciting games. Enjoy that. I know you guys are going down there and
we're heading
enjoy
down.
yourself down there. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Okay.
Well, I have to tell you, this was one of my favorite shows that we've done. We've done like 87 shows, Bob, and this is one of the favorite ones because I tell a lot of stories, but I love listening to good stories too. And thank you so very much for sharing your time with us. We really appreciate you coming out and joining us.
Well, it's great to be with a good Villanova guy. So that's okay.
Well, thanks for that. You've been listening to,
over here.
You've been listening to the Big East Rewind with Chuck Everson and Sonny Spera. The Big East Rewind is produced and directed by Nick Chico Chorus and Daryl Gurney. Check us out on all things social media by putting Big East Rewind in the search bar. And don't forget to like, share it with your friends. Okay. Have a great night.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.
Welcome, guys.